Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Helen Turnquist, and I am the Economic Development Specialist here at the BDC. We're really excited to have you joining us for our webinar today on finding and securing a commercial space in Berwyn. So we know that for many entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their business, finding the right commercial space can be one of the most exciting, but also one of the most complicated, overwhelming parts of starting it or expanding a business. So in today's session, it's designed to give you a clear understanding of how that process works and to connect you with resources that can help make it easier. See, want to go to the next slide, Alexis? Thank you. So here's kind of an overview of today's objectives. We'll start the session with my colleague Alexis, who will talk about the BDC's role in helping businesses find commercial spaces. She'll walk you through one of the tools that we use to help businesses find commercial spaces and explain how you can access those resources. Then we'll hear from our presenter, Josue Duarte from Duarte Realty, who will provide an overview of the commercial real estate process, including leasing basics, budgeting considerations, and tips for finding the right space. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll leave some time for questions so you can ask if you have specific questions. Yeah, so without further ado, I will pass it on to my colleague Alexis Alimo, who is the project manager of economic development here at the BDC.
Thanks, Helen. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis, and I've been with the Berwyn Development Corporation now for just approaching a year. So I'm hoping to, moving forward, continue connecting with all of you in the Berwyn area, meeting some of you, and hopefully helping you find some spaces here in the community. So as many of you most likely know or will hopefully be familiar with by the end of the presentation, the BDC is the City of Berwyn's economic development partner, as well as the area's local chamber of commerce. And a major part of our efforts is working to support economic growth and investment by aligning businesses, entrepreneurs, and developers with available sites per the city's local zoning regulations, planning goals, and community goals. As such, one of my primary efforts here at the BDC is overseeing our available property and vacant property database. Um, in an effort to encourage not only the reuse of some of our vacant properties, but to strengthen our commercial corridors and ensure that, again, that businesses are finding the spaces in our community that are going to help them succeed. So when you're seeking a potential space, whether that's in Berwyn or elsewhere, think of the BDC as your first call, not as your final property negotiator. We can help you ask the right questions, get a better understanding of what you may be looking for in terms of size, where you should be opening, what your property may need once you are open and running, etc. And we help you asking these questions early before you get started can save on money and the overall time and energy that it's going to take you to get up and running. Once you're ready to start your search, come to the BDC and we can get you started with some potential options. And then, of course, we're going to be encouraging you to get connected with a local commercial broker or realtor. So before jumping in and starting to find spaces, it's important to take a step back and think through some of the key questions on what it is exactly that you need and what are you looking for? Are you looking to lease or purchase a property? What might your budget be for rent or a purchase agreement? How much space do you need? And how is your business going to be operating on a day-to-day basis? Consider things like, are you a salon? Will you need water and tubs? Are you a retail space that needs storefront access and visibility to promote your products? Are you needing something more short-term? That might be a lease. If you're looking for a more unique space to fit your needs and a long-term investment, maybe you're consider purchasing a property. And some things to consider, especially here in the Berwyn area. The average space that retail storefronts are looking for is about 800 to 2,000 square feet, and that's about the spot size of the majority of available properties at this time. And when you're thinking about these questions, these aren't things that you need to necessarily have answered right away. But I would say having these questions explored and an idea of what you're looking for when you're actually approaching the step of looking at specific sites, you'll be geared up and ready to go. Another factor to consider when looking at properties in the Berwyn area is understanding the local zoning regulations. So as many of you may likely already understand, not every business is allowed to operate in every area throughout the community. Zoning rules affect where and how you're allowed to operate your business, as well as overall design standards and such. So if you look on your screen, I noted some of the primary commercial zoning areas, zoning districts within Berwyn. It's C1 through 4, commercial 1 through 4. And I've kind of organized them in the overall functions of types of business activity. So if you're more neighborhood focused business looking to service local community and residents, you may be looking for a site on 16th or 26th Street or portions of Ridgeland that allow that. So between 26th and 29th. If you're more retail, perhaps a restaurant or a nice clothing storefront, jewelry store, maybe you'll consider a space on Roosevelt near our Berwyn shops or along Cermak. And so forth with the transit-oriented district in the depot where you get the metro trains running through regularly, or along Ogden where some of our more auto-oriented businesses are operating. There's also the industrial zoning areas as well as public service where maybe you'll see operations such as schools or hospitals or more of the light warehousing taking place. But again, understanding where your business is allowed to operate based on use and the way you'll be functioning is critical to then seeking out sites within those specific areas. So now you've thought through what your business is going to need in terms of space and perhaps the area in which you're looking for. Now you might be coming to the BDC to go ahead and start looking at potential sites. One of the ways in which we're able to assist businesses in finding potential sites is through our available property map. Our available property map includes an index of both public and privately listed properties for lease or sale, as well as some of our private vacant properties in the community, vacant commercial properties in the community as well that may not be as widely advertised. Oh, I apologize about that. So again, our available property map is a tool that we have hosted on our website. And in a moment, I'll give you a quick preview of that site. Again, it's a collection of all properties that are both public, not all properties, a majority of publicly and privately listed properties. It includes all site information as it would if you were searching through a local realtor partner. On the site, once you've found some potential sites for you, see if I can open this. That's when you'd want to come to us to get you in connection with the commercial broker and or property representative. If you can see my screen, this is the available properties tool. Looks like a simple map, but if you click on that map, it'll open to another page. And this is where you can do a very detailed search on what it is exactly that you're looking for. So some of those questions that you had thought of previously, the size, any specific use or zoning regulations that you know of, whether you're looking to purchase or lease, is the site a multi-tenant, is it retail, or is it just office space? You can drop in all of those specifications here and then search for exactly what it is that you're looking for. Your results will populate to the left of the page, where then you can select the individual options and see a full detailed recap of that specific site. If you were to have any additional questions, let me close that out for you. That's when you can reach out to myself or anybody on our economic development team, and we'd be able to, again, either get you in touch with the listed property manager and or broker or site representative, or answer any additional questions that you may have about the site, clarifying its zoning regulations, site specifications, uses, etc. And again, our vacant property database plays into our available property map, as we collect information on all vacant registered sites and we upload that information there. So it's important to keep in mind that these properties may cost a bit more to get open and operating in, as they're not necessarily up to code. However, this is an effort in which, again, we are attempting to get these sites filled and active. Think of these tools as like the starting place to understand what's available in Berwyn. And so again, once you've come to us and we've helped you identify some of the available properties or answer your questions about what type of business may be able to operate where, and you've narrowed your needs, you've confirmed zoning and identified those target areas, that's when we're going to help you get connected again to that commercial broker or realtor. It's important to get connected with these folks because truthfully, they have the greatest, deeper understanding of the local market knowledge. They can really answer your question specifics. They can give you an idea of what's the commercial activity happening in that area. What's the foot traffic like? What are some of the target folks who pass through and what are they looking for? Will your business succeed in that area? And so while the BDC offers those high level details and information, it's important to get connected. And I strongly encourage you to get connected with these brokers in our community, especially considering the fact that once we help you get to that site, they are going to be that point, point facilitator in helping you finalize those lease and or purchase agreements. I also want to note that their services are generally free in helping you find any sites as they're working on behalf of the property owners or property representatives to get those sites filled. So while there may be some fees or negotiations on the back end if you're moving forward with the site, generally they're wanting to help you get those sites filled. So reaching out to them is key. And our chamber does does provide a list of local broker members on our website that I'd be happy to point you to if you're interested in seeking out some of their information. So now that you've heard about how exactly you should be starting your site search and how the BDC can support you early on, I'm going to hand things over to our commercial expert, Josue. Josue is the founder and managing broker at Duarte Realty Company, and he's going to be able to walk you through what happens once you've started working with his team, whether that's budgeting or understanding the leasing or buying process, and what to expect as you move forward in securing a space. And if you're interested in getting in touch, my contact information is on the screen, and we'd be happy to talk with you moving forward. Josue?
Hey everyone, my name's Josue Duarte. Thank you, Alexis. That was very thorough, great information. So the goal for me today is to share some general information on the steps and process to actually lease or purchase a commercial space here in Berwyn. Just a little bit about myself. I've lived in Berwyn for a few years. I have a business, so Duarte Realty Company. Like we're actually located here in Berwyn. I've had my business for 6 years now. Initially, I was leasing for 4 to 5 years, and I just opened up my actual shop that I purchased the building in here in Berwyn on Cermak and Clinton, and we just opened up a couple months ago. So I kind of have the experience of doing both the purchase and the lease, and we've also helped many clients over the years lease and purchase here in Berwyn. Just a little bit more about us. So again, I'm the managing broker. I'm the owner of our office. We sell about $100 million in volume every year on average over the last few years. I've done everything from residential, single family, condos, new construction to, commercial restaurants to, $50,000 purchases to $1 million plus warehouses and industrial. So I've got a pretty high level understanding of many components of what you'll probably see. I think a lot of the stuff that you'll likely see here in Berwyn is pretty straightforward and simple. And hopefully after today, you can kind of get a general idea what that process looks like. I personally, again, went through a renovation here in Berwyn for my own business on Cermak. So again, I have a really thorough understanding of what the permit process looks like, inspection process, and I'll share just a little bit about the grants that I received as well through the BDC and the city of Berwyn, which was really helpful in just kind of getting my personal shop opened up here.
And can
Um,
can everyone see the presentation? Yeah. Okay, great.
all right, so I think we go to the next slide here. All right, so kind of like what Alexis mentioned, like if you're gonna purchase, let's start off with the purchase side. So if you're thinking about buying, you have a small business, and you're like, hey, I'm ready to kind of take that next step. Again, I personally went through both the lease and the purchase. My honest opinion is that if you think that you have a good business idea, or if you've already got a couple years with a business, you've got a taco truck, and now you're looking for a brick and mortar. My honest idea, and this goes even for residential, like instead of leasing. My suggestion is first even getting a snapshot, getting an idea of what that would look like if you were to purchase something. I think a lot of small businesses and home buyers even, they don't realize that they may actually be able to buy. And with today's market and inventory, which I'll go into in a second, like it might actually be pretty comparable to purchase and compared to a lease. Again, this is my personal experience leasing for 4 to 5 years and buying an actual property. Like my bills, if anything, are slightly lower now that I have a purchase and so or a building that I own. And so I would really encourage everyone to kind of look at this step first. I know that the BDC has a number of really amazing banks that are part of the chamber here in Berwyn, and they all have different products. So again, I would say the first step, even if you're thinking about leasing, like maybe have a conversation with a lender or two. And I can share a list. Well, actually, Alexis and Helen, they have a list of the chamber members who are banks here. Most of them do commercial lending. So most of them are going to have a product that may fit your needs. Different banks specialize in different types of products, so I do want to emphasize that. Typically, what I recommend is maybe having at least one conversation. But if that first conversation doesn't go the way that you planned, I highly encourage you guys to maybe have conversations and maybe shop around. See who's going to give you the best product. Certain lenders may specialize in certain things. Like you have a lender that may specialize in strip malls or normal general office space. You may have other lenders who really specialize and may really do well in industrial or warehouses or body shops or auto shops. So really, the type of lender that you go to will have different products. And so I do recommend that you maybe have conversations with a few different lenders. Oftentimes, that first lender may not have the product that you need. And so we do recommend having, again, second, third, fourth, five conversations before you select that lender, just so you see what your options are. Typically, a lender is going to look at a few things. They're going to look at your bank statements. They're going to look at your finances, your P&L. They want to see the history of your business to see what kind of product you would qualify for, what kind of purchase price you qualify for, and if you and what kind of monthly payment you would also qualify for. So again, this is kind of the beginning step. With commercial, you're typically going to find slightly different products than you would compared to if you were buying like a residential. So if you're buying residential, typically fixed rate, 30-year mortgage is very standard. With commercial, you might find some ARM products. You might find a few other different types of products. So again, depending on the specific a business that you have and where you're looking and the type of property that you're trying to obtain, you may have different products available to you. So again, I have a list of these lenders. I know that Helen and Alexis have that list of chamber members who also do commercial lending. So that might be the first step to kind of start off with. Again, Byline, Central Federal here in Berwyn, Republic, BMO. These are all great banks. Again, local banks that are part of the Berwyn Chamber that can give you some products. So continuing on to the next slide.
Sorry, it's being slow. Okay. Thank
So, like Alexis mentioned, if you're buying or with a lease, again, we're focusing on the purchase side now. We'll kind of talk about the lease in a second. If you're buying it, it makes sense to have that budget, to have that monthly payment budget set up prior to you purchasing. Of course, there's going to be many conversations, especially with the lender, with the realtor, with your attorney, as far as what that budget looks like. But typically, the main items that are part of that monthly payment are going to be the mortgage or the loan, property taxes, which is a really big important piece, especially with a purchase. You want to know what those taxes are. So part of the due diligence, part of the verification that you should be doing, and your attorney's definitely going to do this, and a good lender, and for sure a realtor should be looking at, is what kind of tax bill that property has. Here in Berwyn and in the state of Illinois, Cook County and other counties, you're going to find a range of taxes. You can find property taxes on commercial spaces as low as, I don't know, $7,000, $8,000 to as high as 60, 70, $100,000, just depending on the kind of building, the square footage, where that property is located. And so part of that due diligence that we do when we're helping a client purchase a property is verifying taxes. Are there any appeals on that tax, like vacancy appeals that are maybe reducing the actual tax bill? So we want to make sure that you, as a future business owner, building owner, that you've verified and you know exactly what that tax bill is going to be. Is there a reassessment coming up? So again, it's understanding what that monthly payment is, and part of that monthly payment is understanding that property tax bill to that specific property. Other things that are included in your budget are property insurance, so the insurance to insure the actual building. Other things to consider, of course, are the business general liability insurance, so the insurance for the actual business, utilities, water, scavenger, electric, gas, and all that good stuff, as well as capital expenditures that may be coming up. So that is part of the budget that you should be kind of considering when you're sitting down with the lender. Again, typically this will be the conversation that you have to kind of determine like what can we actually afford, or what is a realistic budget for us. Some of the costs right here on the right-hand column, we have some of the costs that are traditional or normal with a purchase. Again, it makes sense to talk to different lenders. I've seen a variety of products. Different lenders offer different benefits. Maybe it's the interest rate, maybe it's a down payment, maybe it's the type of loan itself. Typical down payment, if you're buying a property, a commercial property, what I typically see normally is between 15 to 25% down. Again, 15 to 25% down. Again, it's depending on the lender, depending on the borrower, depending on the type of property that you're purchasing. So 15 to 25% down is normal. But we've seen if you're buying like a mixed use property, let's say you are looking for just an office space and you're okay with occupying the apartment upstairs, which is normal in a mixed use property. We see these on Cermak, you've got a couple on Ogden, definitely Lombard, Ridgeland. There's a lot of mixed use properties. If you are going to occupy as an owner, meaning that you're going to live and reside in that property, there are programs out there with as little as 3.5 to 5% down. So you can purchase a property for 3.5 to 5% down as a down payment on that purchase. SBA options. So I've worked with SBA in the past as well. There's 15% options. There's grants out there available. So again, I think starting that conversation with the lender is probably going to reveal some of the programs that you may qualify for, depending again on your credit profile, your personal finances, your business finances, and the type of property that you're purchasing. We always tell our clients that on top of the down payment, have maybe a plan in place for additional closing fees, which are typically the loan origination fees, title fees, transfer stamps, taxes, that kind of thing. On average, depending on the purchase price, but I would say on average, we probably see about $8,000 to $10,000. So again, I like to start here. You never know with a purchase whether you will actually qualify for an actual mortgage, if that's the best route to take. So I like to kind of start with maybe having a few conversations with some lenders for most of our clients, even if you were thinking of leasing. Okay, so next up or next slide. With a purchase, we typically begin our search. I think it makes sense to have a conversation with a realtor. The reason for it is realtors have access to a database called the MLS. If you're on Redfin, Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, a lot of these public-facing websites typically only show you residential real estate. So a lot of the commercial real estate is housed in the MLS, which means that even if you're not going to commit to a realtor, like I would probably just reach out to a broker. There's a lot of great brokers here. Like Alexis mentioned, you can go on the BDC website, find the realtors that are local, and maybe just ask them to start you up with an auto search. So if you're not ready to commit 100% to even working with that real estate agent, just have them send you an auto search on what is available on the MLS. This is the database that realtors upload their listings to. And like I said, not all those commercial listings go to the public facing websites like Redfin, Zillow, Realtor.com, etc. Another good website that a lot of our clients use, and I personally use myself, is LoopNet. So you guys can Google LoopNet, and this has a number of the commercial listings that are also available. Typically, a broker or real estate agent is going to upload that listing to the market or to the LoopNet website, and it's the most popular Chicagoland commercial website where you're going to find commercial real estate, both leases and purchases or sales. Sometimes it might make sense to actually just like drive around. We've seen and we've helped clients buy things off market. Sometimes it's really just a matter of driving around, especially leases, commercial leases. There's a lot of mom and pop shops here in Berwyn, a lot of small landlords. And so sometimes you just see signs go up a couple weeks, and then a couple weeks later, you have a new business there. So drive around, do that. I know it's a little bit maybe unorthodox, but at the end of the day, like maybe driving around and just keeping your eyes peeled for potential opportunities also helps. And then lastly, which actually should be the first thing on my list, like this is a really phenomenal tool that I personally use. I definitely send all my clients to this tool, which Alexis just talked about, the BDC Property Locator. Alexis and her team, the BDC, they do a great job at identifying anything that's on the MLS or LoopNet or off market. They have conversations with a lot of mom and pop businesses that want to sell or are thinking of leasing or starting up a business. So I've many times have found listings here on the on the BDC property locator that I would not have found on the MLS or somewhere else. So it's a pretty all-encompassing tool. I may begin there. So start off with using that tool and then go down the list with the rest of the items that I have here. So we can go on to the next slide.
Is
All
this
right.
the one?
So sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. So for a purchase, there's a lot of protections. For buyers, there's way more protections. Like, there's no way if you're working with a good attorney, good realtor, good lender, it's really, really tough to not be fully aware of what you're buying because there are so many contingencies, so many protections for a buyer. Just to give you guys a breakdown of the steps so that you know what your protections are. Typically, there's a letter of intent. So once you identify the property that you like, let's say that you actually went to go look at you looked at a bunch of properties, you like the property that you like. There's typically a letter of intent that's drafted up by the realtor. This is a letter that has your general terms. So the terms being, what's the purchase price, closing timeline, what kind of financing are you using, what kind of contingencies exist. So you put the major terms on this letter of intent. This is just a draft. Like it's not really the actual contract, but this happens first. So it's your first kind of protection to even make sure that both buyer and seller are comfortable with even proceeding with this process. Moving forward on the next slide, we kind of dive deeper into an actual contract. So after both buyer and sellers have determined really those major terms, what's going to happen next is that you're going to put an attorney to actually write a contract on your behalf. This contract again has many contingencies, has many protections for you as the buyer. There's a few steps that take place immediately. So first, typically we give what's called an earnest money deposit within the first 5 business days on a normal commercial transaction. This deposit could be anywhere as low as $1,000 to as high as 20, 30, $50,000, really depending on the kind of property and what's negotiated with the seller. This money is your money. So at the day of closing or when you close on this property, this is reducing or it's being applied to your down payment and closing costs. So the total cost to purchase a property with 5% down plus another $10,000 was $30,000. If you put $10,000 up as earnest money, this reduces that money that you need to bring to closing. So it is your money. It is typically protected by the many contingencies and many protections that a buyer has as they're, going through this process. There's an inspection and due diligence period, 5 to 20 business days, again, depending on what's negotiated with the seller. Again, a lot of due diligence. The main thing that we recommend when you're purchasing a property, whether it's commercial or anything else, is to inspect the property. Most sellers are going to allow you to inspect that property with a licensed inspector with the state of Illinois. Most real estate agents or attorneys have a list of great inspectors that they work with, so you don't have to Google anybody if you don't want to. This inspector is going to take a few hours and they should be looking at the entire property from plumbing to electrical to roof to windows to water pressure to structural. And so this is a protection for you, the buyer. Should this inspection reveal major defects or major issues, then you have the right to terminate the contract. Again, it is a contingency, it's a protection. Should you terminate the contract, the deposit or the earnest money is refunded to the buyer. There's a few other things that we do during the due diligence period. One thing we already talked about is the property taxes, right? We want to know what the tax bill is currently, what you will be paying likely scenario over the next year with property taxes. So we always verify if there are appeals, if they have been reduced, or again, sometimes there's vacancies and other ways to reduce taxes. So we want to make sure that you are aware of what the true total tax bill will be for that property. Clearing title, again, sellers sometimes have multiple mortgages, liens, and so part of the attorney's job is to ensure that you're getting clear title, and that's part of the due diligence period as well. Alexis discussed or spoke a little bit about the zoning process. Berwyn's actually really accessible, which is something I really like about Berwyn, is that if you have questions about a specific property, and this was my experience with my personal purchase with other clients who have bought here in Berwyn, there's a business licensing department. You can literally walk into City Hall any normal business day and just ask for the licensing director. And if you have questions about a particular property or what you want to open in that space, then the licensing director or his team can give you some general information as to what is doable and what is not doable. In a lot of other cities and a lot of other towns, there's definitely a lot of layers before you can even get an answer. And so here in Berwyn, you have someone or multiple people, including the licensing department or the BDC, who can give you general information as to what you can or cannot do in that particular space that you may be interested in. There are different approvals that you have to kind of consider as you're purchasing, but these are all contingencies. So that means that you can put a deal together. You can have a contract with a seller. A seller and buyer can have all the major terms, uh, detailed. And part of your contingencies can be like, hey, I want to make sure that I have the right zoning. I want to confirm and verify that I'm getting the proper approvals. I want to verify all of these things to ensure that this is the right space for myself as the buyer. Just a few other notes here. There's a Berwyn pre-sale inspection. Most properties, actually all properties, go through a Berwyn pre-sale inspection to ensure that the property is up to all the codes that the city has. So again, that is part of your due diligence to review that report before you even sign or close on that deal. Additional due diligence that you may be doing is for sure these are all part once you have the contract. So once the buyer and seller have a contract, there's a few steps to take place. We already talked about the buyer's inspection. We talked about the Berwyn pre-sale inspection. We talked about title, verifying taxes, your lenders looking at the monthly payment, confirming all these things. There's an underwriting process that takes place. When you initially speak to a lender, they may give you a general idea of what you will qualify for. But for commercial specific, especially in commercial, you're going to verify all of these items that you guys discussed in your initial meeting with that lender. The lender is going to verify through an underwriting process. So they're going to verify income, verify assets, verify P&L, verify that your taxes have been paid with the IRS. Additional inspections may be required. Let's say that you do find an issue with the roof. You have a right to inspect that roof with a licensed roofing inspector. Certain lenders require additional inspections as well. And one of the major protections for borrowers or buyers is the appraisal. So an appraisal is a valuation of the property. Should you submit a strong offer, should you not feel extremely confident with the price that you have under contract with the seller, there's still a third party review. There's still an additional review that can take place that is part of your right as a buyer to appraise that property, to have a third party confirm, is this price a legitimate, accurate price of a sale in for that particular property? So really a lot of protections. This for commercial, for residential, you have a lot of protections in place. Should something come up in this period that does not meet what you were expecting or does not align with your expectations, these are typically contingencies for you to terminate the contract and receive your deposit back. So again, that's why it's important to have a good attorney, a good realtor who can maybe set a lot of these terms in motion from the very beginning. But like I mentioned, attorneys, lenders, they verify all these things to ensure that you are receiving a product that you were expecting to purchase from the very beginning. I kind of already mentioned that we have access to the city of Berwyn, the BDC. There's different departments, especially if we're going to do a renovation, which I can talk about in a little bit. But you have access to these people because it's an environment again where you can pick up the phone or drive to the city hall or drive to the BDC, and someone's there and someone's accessible to answer your questions. We can move on to the next slide. So that's the commercial process. The commercial process for purchasing, I'm sorry, that's the purchase process. So for buying a property, I would say on average to find a property, I mean, it can be weeks, it could be months. We're kind of in an environment in the market where we're seeing not a lot of inventory, even with commercial, whether it's leasing or buying. So really, we do recommend that you really keep your eyes peeled for potential opportunities. Finding something again could be weeks, it could be months. Once you identify that space, from the moment that you go under contract, seller and buyer agree on terms to the closing, it's about maybe 45 days. And it could be a little bit longer depending on what kind of inspections and what kind of review you're doing. But 45 to 60 days is probably pretty standard. If you were to lease, so let's talk a little bit about what a lease process looks like. A lease is essentially, you're renting from a landlord. It's very similar process where you're looking at a monthly payment rather than a mortgage, and then the payments depend really on how the lease is structured. So a very simple lease will likely just be like a base rent amount and you as a tenant, you just have to think about what your budget is. Like, consider obviously utilities. Are you paying heat, electric, gas, commercial general liability, or anything else or snow removal? So those are things to kind of consider as you're coming up with a budget for your lease. On my next page, again, I kind of differentiate between the two most common lease types. So the most common one, like I mentioned, is a flat monthly payment. Most of these leases have like a small increment or small increase on an annual or biannual basis, meaning that you may be renting something for $1,000 a month, but part of the lease says like that the tenant's going to be increasing that rent amount by 5% or 10% on a year-to-year basis. Most of the properties, like Alexis mentioned, here in Berwyn, I think a lot of them are mom and pop owned. So it's typically small landlords. Most of these landlords are looking for the most simple setup. So like if you can structure a deal where this is your setup, where it's really just a base amount and that's it, like that is the most ideal way of doing this, and it's probably the cleanest way of doing it. Now, there are other more complex structures depending on the kind of landlord, depending on the kind of facility that you're renting. So on the next slide, we kind of show you guys a little bit about a little bit more as to what those structures look like. So the more complex one would be where the tenant's paying a base, but then they're also paying maybe taxes, insurance, or a portion of CAM. So CAM is common area maintenance. There's different versions of this. On the next page, I'll kind of walk you through those versions. So again, this is for someone that may be occupying like a 10,000 square foot warehouse, or maybe a more corporate entity who's looking for a 15 to 20-year lease. So if you're like a Walgreens or a Chase, these are typically 15, 20-year leases rather than like 2 to 5 year leases, which is a little bit more normal for mom and pop shops. So again, for more complex, more structure, then you're looking at single, double, or triple net leases. Single net leases, the tenant pays the rent plus the property taxes, or a portion of the property taxes, depending on how many tenants there are. So if there are 3 tenants in that strip mall, then maybe each tenant is paying 33% of the property taxes for that year. So the taxes go up. Everyone who's a tenant in that building has the same liability for that tax bill. And it's a similar process with a double net, where you're paying your base rents plus property taxes plus a portion of the insurance for the entire building. And with a triple net lease, which we see quite often, again with maybe bigger facilities, warehouses, longer lease terms, you're going to get your base rent, property taxes, a portion of the insurance, and then a portion of the CAM, which is maintenance. So like maintenance for snow removal, maintenance for overall repairs that the building may need. On to the next slide. So a couple of things to consider with a lease, unlike a purchase. So on a purchase, you're looking at the down payment plus the closing cost. Way, way more simple with the lease. So with the lease, you're looking at just your deposit plus the first month's rent. So a deposit typically is maybe at 1 month. I mean, some landlords may require a little bit more, just depending on the kind of usage or the kind of landlord. Deposit could be on average, I would say, first month's rent, but it could be maybe 2 to 3 months worth of rent. Some things to consider with the lease. I would say a majority of, at least in my experience, a majority of tenants, typically, if there's going to be renovations to the unit, which I did myself when I was leasing on Ogden and Clinton, most renovations fall on the tenant, which I think is surprising for a lot of tenants when they first begin to look for that lease. But a lot of the renovation falls on the tenant. So if you're gonna, open a restaurant and it's currently not retrofitted to have a restaurant in there, like a lot of the time it is going to fall on the tenant, unless there's a negotiation that takes place where you're maybe increasing your rental amount. But for the most part, renovations do fall on the tenant. Again, proper permits are required if you're going to do a renovation. Again, depending on the kind of renovation that's taking place, certain, it may flag certain conversations with ensuring that you have the right permit to make the work to do the work on the space. But again, my personal experience when I rented my Ogden location before we moved over to Cermak, I spent like 40, $50,000 on the renovation, which is why I kind of am encouraging a lot of you guys, if there's a possibility to have a conversation with a lender to purchase, to acquire, even from a financial standpoint, like again, a renovation can be pretty costly, and at the end of the day, you're not owning the space. Now, my personal experience was that at the time, maybe I just didn't have everything lined up to purchase the property. So for me, it makes sense to lease. And so that could be the case for a lot of you guys as well, which is also a fair play because maybe you start off for a couple years, just like I did. Once you feel comfortable, you know that your business is rocking and rolling, then you can, you know, go on and graduate to that purchase. Repairs for most spaces are, you know, you can negotiate this into the lease, like who's going to take care of repairs in the building. But for the most part, what we typically see is that anything that's within the actual unit that you're renting is typically paid for by the tenant. And most of the time, anything that's exterior, like the roof, windows, tuck pointing, parking lot, a lot of the exterior structural or mechanical components are typically assumed by the landlord. In your lease, you want to define all the terms up front. So some of the terms to think about again is repairs, maintenance, who's doing cleaning, who's paying for CAM, how is parking utilized? How's that divvied up? If there's 15 parking spots, how many of those parking spots can you use? Define usage of common spaces. What hours can you operate your business? How can you utilize the building for marketing or signage? So a lot of these terms are baked into the actual lease itself from the very beginning. I always tell my clients to really make sure that you have an option to renew on that lease or an option to purchase the property. Should the landlord decide 1 year after you rent the building and do your renovation that they want to sell the building, you want to have an option baked into that lease that essentially gives you the right to purchase or the first right to purchase that property before they put it on the market. So that's a really important piece that I've seen many people get burnt by not having the proper lease or the right terms from the very beginning. On the next page, typically I recommend that you guys utilize an attorney because you know oftentimes we forget, like we don't know what should be on here. If this is the first commercial lease that you're ever doing, like you're just not going to know. As a realtor, typically we have a lot of guidance. We'll give you a lot of recommendations. Even so, like I miss things, so I always like to have that second review with an attorney on the tenant side. Even so, a lot of times landlords have their own specific lease that they've drafted up with their attorney. I like to hire an attorney. It's a couple $100 for an attorney to review the lease to ensure that any term that you need on that lease is baked into that lease from the very beginning. Just a couple different notes here that I find important as you're looking for a property. I know this is a little confusing sometimes for a lot of people. Like, what's the price per square foot? How do you calculate the monthly payment on a property if you're giving the price per square foot? So I have an example here. If again, this is simple math, right? I think on average you're probably going to find like 15 to $25 for like office spaces here in Berwyn for price per square foot. But just to have simple math, if it's a $10 per, you know, $10 price per square foot, you have 1,000 square feet. Well, then you're looking at 10,000. I'm sorry, that's a typo. You're looking at $10,000 per year. You divide that by 12, and that's how you get your monthly payment for the square foot. So going on to the next page. So yeah, so I guess that was the spiel on the lease process. Again, for you guys, as you guys are thinking about buying or leasing, again, maybe have a conversation with the lender early on. If it doesn't make sense, that's fine. We all start. I mean, I started with the lease for sure, and so it makes sense to again start the conversation with the lender and then explore lease options as well. I just wanted to make a quick note. I was actually the recipient of a finish line grant. So if you are thinking about buying a property, I know Alexis is going to have a lot more information with this. There's more information online on the BDC website. I received a grant from the city of Berwyn and from the BDC to renovate the space, which I think is an amazing tool. I spent maybe 3 or 4 to 1, but that 25%, 30% reimbursement that I received from the city of Berwyn was really, really, really I think the defining reason for me to even go, I don't know, go all out with my renovation because I could have just probably done some really basic work, but we ended up doing a really nice renovation that now I think helps with the corridor. I'm on Cermak, so I think it's helping with the corridor. It's helping with, you know, bring in more business for me as well. So this is a really neat program that the BDC offers. Again, there's more information on the website, but this is just awesome. I think it's great if you're a small business, you need help with doing any renovations or any improvements to your space. Like this might just be somewhere to kind of consider looking into as well. And again, Alexis is the contact for that for the BDC. Lastly, I kind of went into this a little bit. There's a renovation process. There's a legal renovation process, right? That you need to take. if you're renovating a space. So typically, just to give you guys a quick recap of how that works, if you like a space, you're going to do some work to the space, you take out a permit to do the work. Sometimes you may need an architect to put some plans together. Depending on the kind of business, whether it's a restaurant or an office space, there are different requirements, different codes that you need to adhere to. And so, either you can even do this during your due diligence period before you purchase or before you even sign that lease. Again, having a conversation with the building department, with the city licensing department, with the fire uh, department as well, so that you know exactly what kind of work you need to do to the property. For example, if you're going to do a restaurant on a space that used to be just an office space, well, you may need freezers, you may need ovens, you may need more electrical power to that particular unit. And so part of the code requirement may be to upgrade your power, your service from 100 amps to 200 amps. And so these are the kind of conversations that may make sense to take place prior to you even buying the property and prior to even signing that lease. But again, most leases, most purchases will allow you to have those conversations. Berwyn's very, very good at having quick responses and just being very thorough with those conversations. I think that's all I had in my slides, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So I guess the last slide, what makes the most sense for you? Again, my name's Josue. So if anyone has any questions, you guys are, feel free to send me a message or shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And yeah, good luck to everyone with their search of their property.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I do want to open it up if anyone has specific questions at this time. And by the way, I will send out this recording as well as the contact information for our team and Josue. So you can definitely reach out to us that way. But if anyone has any questions right now, we'd be happy to take them. Anyone? No?
I take it
Okay.
then we provided some pretty clear instructions and next steps for folks. So hopefully either myself or Josue are hearing from you in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, we went over a lot of information. So, yeah, just follow up with any questions that you have. Again, thank you so much, Josue, and thank you, Alexis, for your contributions. And yeah, I'll follow up with all this information. But thank you, everyone, for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good one.